Hello garden people! I'm out at my parents' house in the country, and I wanted to walk through some of their gardening they put in this year, and then also some of the water mitigation strategies that we've put in. So these are the 3 raised beds that my dad and I made earlier this spring, and if you come closer you can see the seedlings are starting to come in. So there's a whole variety of lettuces and greens and whatnot that my younger brother sent some seeds to him. So we built these beds, and you can see the lettuces and the radishes and the carrots and the kale and the whole, like basically any sort of green that you could imagine we've got growing here. So that's pretty exciting. The beds are working well. It's a combination of compost, some topsoil, some biochar, a bit of composted leaf litter. On the 3rd bed, it's a little different. You can see the onions and the potatoes coming in. So this is pretty exciting. And they're pretty sturdy beds. We're in the process of actually using the chicken wire to put around the beds. Debating different ideas. I think we'll probably end up putting a gate so that you can enter and exit the gardens more easily. But when we designed it, we intentionally put the beds basically perpendicular to a spot that was eroding. So to mitigate that, we've done a variety of, we built some berms. And so last time we had a pretty big rain. I showed you, I have some clips from an earlier rain in the week where they had another big rain yesterday. See, this is the most fundamental berm, and you can see that there's actually still quite a bit of water stored up in the wood chips and compost here. I have gone ahead and put some sun chokes and a few strawberries in the berm to kind of get it going. The soil here is incredibly clay rich, so if you look at it, it's got a very high water holding capacity, but a relatively low infiltration rate. And so basically a swale berm complex helps the water to spread, to slow down, and to sink in over time. So this berm has worked pretty well so far. You can see a little bit of debris flowing away in the level spillway. So it certainly doesn't trap all the water, but it stops a pretty good portion. Now, let's continue up the hill. So I put a series of berms because I didn't want all of the water coming down this hill to hit one berm. So it should hit in a cascading fashion and get trapped at various points. So here you can see 2 different berms with the addition of some tire tracks from when the house was being constructed. So there's actually depressions in the land that are acting as little micro swales that were here already, or at least here from the construction of the house.
Well, except that they're running vertically up the hill.
Yeah, sure, but if you look at it, but given the combination of this berm and these tracks, they are acting as little swales. I mean, they have water in them.
Right.
So that's exciting. And then what I was working on yesterday, or the last couple of days, are a series of new berms over here, which is in some ways more difficult. Now, if you look, there's actually really 2 major areas of erosion. On the one closest to the camera, so here, this is actually predominantly from the house. So you can see the downspout there. There's quite a bit of surface area that is obviously impermeable, and so it comes shooting out, and that basically contributes here. So this, we still have to resolve somehow. But if you look here, all of this erosion coming down from some plantings my mom has, you can see the wood chips. I don't believe any of these wood chips were placed here. I think this is all flow down. And you can see it's coming down. It looks like it actually even washed up a little bit more yesterday. But all of this erosion is coming from up this side of the hill. So it's a combination of source areas here that we're trying to deal with. But if we can stop this source of erosion, then it'll make this source easier to deal with later. So now let's go look at the berms that we put in. So it's kind of hard to see now, but any area of the land increases in slope, you can usually see more washout. So if you look in here, you can see that there's not much grass. And that was especially true for in here, which is why I built the berms here. So if you look in between these 2 berms, you can still see evidence of like matted grass and a relative lack of thickness and the topsoil eroding. So what I first put in was actually this berm. Like sequentially it was 1, 2, and then 3 at the top. And so this is a pretty beefy berm. If you compare it to what we put in over there, it's pretty significantly thicker. I kind of made a double layer of sod filled in with a clay core and then topped with sod. And this one actually has a swale, versus those are pretty much entirely just berms. If you come from the top side, you can actually see the water pooling in the top. A couple details that make this kind of fun is in this area I found some wild strawberries. So all along the top here, I transplanted in the wild strawberry. Yeah, here's quite a few here. So all these are wild strawberries. which supposedly, hopefully should have little berries. And you can see, this was designed as a swale berm with a level sill, a level spillway. And if you look at the straw, which before this rainstorm was all over where the swale is to keep the sun from just baking the clay, you can see it's been pulled up by the water and then gently released into the forest. So we're not cutting a big divot, but the water, the excess water isn't just going over the top of the berm, it's gently sloping down slope through this grass. So this one actually worked perfectly. I'm very happy with this berm. This is a pretty substantial rain. And over time, this will improve both the water amount in the soil. It'll capture water. And hopefully this berm will improve in quality over time, and I'll plant more tree species, maybe some hazelnut bushes. It remains to be seen, but various roots to stabilize the berm are really important for its function. But right now it's very dense sod, so it should hold pretty well. This one worked really well, so that's exciting. Now let's go to the final or first berm, which is the most substantial out of all of them. It was a huge pain to build because I had to wheelbarrow full of sod from below the house all the way up this hill to this berm. So it took all day.
Yeah, Reed, here you can see water is still slowly trickling down.
I mean, that's the idea. It's not going to stop it completely.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Instead of having it just be a rush a million miles an hour straight down toward the house.
Yeah. So my dad had put these cloth things in previously, and you can see he's used some wood chips to slow down the flow as well. And if you look, above the cloths, I do think it had some effect. So it's the same general idea, just a quicker, not quite so durable solution, but definitely a good one to get going. Okay, so let's talk successes and failures on this one. The successes, well, what makes this part difficult is both the breadth of what I was trying to dam, and also that there's really two distinct drainage areas. There's this one on the left, or the relatively mild one, that's distinct from the main one here. And you can see the water accelerating in both spots. Like there's very little grass here, and then this one's going here. So what I tried to do was make this the primary catchment, and then any overflow would gently overflow that way. And I think overall it worked. So this has a pretty substantial swale. Yesterday this was bone dry. There was no water here. And all of this water came in last night. If you look at the straw, it's kind of hard to see the upper level, but I imagine the water got to about here. If you look at where the straw is distributed. So about 4 inches up the berm. And I would say the swale, maybe 4 to 6 inches, depending on the spot.
How deep is it there?
Yeah, I think about 4 to 6 inches. In the center, probably about 6 inches.
Oh, well here. I have boots on.
Okay. We have a guest feature.
Okay, I am wearing rubber boots.
Rubber boots.
Oh no, that's...
We'll go to the middle. I think it's actually a little deeper there. So what do you think, Dad? What's the verdict? Yeah, I think that's 4 to 6 inches. Yeah. You want to go swimming, Dad?
No.
Cheers. Now, there was a mild failure here. Not catastrophic failure, but not ideal. So, I kind of ran out of steam yesterday. I mean, I was working on this for 5-6 hours probably. And this section was definitely weaker. I think I miscalibrated the height of the spillway, and so it looks like the water overcapped this section of the berm. If you get closer, you can actually see the washout. Once again, the majority of the water is being held over there, so we really just lost the surplus water. But this needs to be repaired at some point. So, not a catastrophic failure, but a mild failure. This was what can happen if you don't get your spillway correct. But, fortunately, I think overall I give it a B+ in its first run. I don't know what my dad would give it, but that's what I give it. And yeah, so I hope over time this helps water sink into the ground, we improve the soil quality, we stop the erosion, which is a major problem here. And yeah, that's kind of the result of where things are at now. So I hope you enjoyed, and I'll give you an update soon. Okay, so now we have my dad is gonna talk about some of the gardening enterprises he's been doing on his own.
So it's, what is it, May 17th, May 18th?
Something like that.
And it's freezing this morning. So, Reed wanted me to just tell you a few things about our garden. First of all, basically we just built it out of scrap lumber from the construction of the house. So it's kind of weird, but we had some 2x12 treated joists from the deck left over, so we used those, and we decided to use some surplus 2x4s sticking up so that we'd have something to attach the chicken wire. In future years, I'll probably add additional height on the planter beds to make them a little bit higher. This pile right here, because we have pure clay and almost no topsoil, it's been very difficult to get grass to grow. So we've had a couple of truckloads of topsoil, 22-ton dump truck fulls, and we actually had a leftover pile here. So I took some landscape blocks and kind of ringed it in, and this mound is kind of the leftover topsoil, to which we added compost. Now over here, I have two. If you look down inside, I've got potatoes. I made potato boxes. And again, these are just, the wood is just scrap cut-offs from the construction of the deck on the back side of the house. So I took some scrap lumber and screwed it together and made potato boxes. The red potatoes coming in faster, the white potatoes coming in a little bit slower.
Is that the same trend you see up in the first box?
Yeah, the first box, the big ones are the red potatoes.
Huh, okay.
Now over here, these are Gardening with Leon self-wicking beds that I'm trying. I know this is electrical conduit that I had left over. So the idea is that in the summer you put water here. There's a reservoir of water down at the bottom, and then the water wicks up, so that they're essentially self-watering. And the reason I mentioned how cold it is today, yes, we jumped the gun on planting our tomatoes because we were at Menards a couple weeks ago. Actually, I've had the tomatoes in for several weeks, and then at night I cover them with this tarp. But they had tomatoes and these flats for like $2 for 6 tomato plants. And they were, you know, what, 2 inches tall, 3 inches tall? So they're doing pretty well considering how cold it is.
And they have little drainage holes, you can see here.
Yes.
So that's why it doesn't fill up too much.
Right, there's a drainage hole so that the water doesn't overwhelm.
Yeah.
So.
Cool. And yeah, so this is the state of the garden, May 2020. And you guys have lived in this property for 2 years now?
We moved in on my 60th birthday 2 summers ago.
So, more to come. Yeah, we didn't even talk about the orchard that'll go up there. But we'll talk about that later. There's not much to see at this point. All right, hope you enjoyed.